Hello everybody, and welcome to Texas A&M AgriLife Extension's Nature Club. We're so excited that you decided to join us for this club. My name is Miss Molly, and I am going to be helping to lead you on some of our lessons as we explore all aspects of nature. We'll be talking about insects, wildlife, food webs, how plants, insects, animals, wildlife, and nature all interact with one another. So for our very first lesson, we're going to be talking about life cycles of different living things. And the first lesson we're going to have is going to be all about the plant life cycle. Plants are incredibly important living things on the earth. Without them, we wouldn't have a lot of things that make our days very easy, that provide nutrition to our body, and many, many other reasons plants are important to us. What are some of those reasons that you can think of that plants might be important? The obvious one that you're probably thinking is that they provide us with food. Probably every time you sit down to take a meal, whether it's breakfast, lunch, dinner, or even maybe a snack, you're consuming something that a plant provided to you. Fruits and vegetables, grains like rice and wheat, the bread that you have your sandwich on, these are all things provided to us by plants. So the number one reason why most of you think that plants are important is because they provide us with food. But I think you'd be surprised at some of the other things that plants give us. They also give us fiber. What is fiber? Well, fiber is cotton. It is clothing that we wear. So most of the clothes, if you look in your blue jeans or your t-shirt, if you look at the tag, it will say that one of the ingredients at least is cotton. That comes from a plant. Cotton is a plant, and we utilize the fluffy white material that we call cotton in order to weave it into fabrics that we use for bedspreads, pillowcases, sheets, towels, clothes that we wear, tennis shoes that you put on your feet. So cotton and fiber is a really important reason why we utilize plants. We would be very naked or wearing very itchy clothes probably if we didn't have plants like cotton to provide us with fibers. Another thing that plants provide us with is shelter. Behind the walls of your house, the doors that you close are made out of wood. Wood is from trees. Trees are plants. So plants provide us with shelter. Food, clothing, and a place to live or rest are all things that we require in order to be alive. If we didn't have food, we could not survive. If we didn't have a place to find shelter, get out of harsh conditions like extreme cold, extreme heat, the rain, the sun, then we couldn't survive either. And if we didn't have anything to cover our bodies with in fiber, then we wouldn't also survive either. So plants are incredibly important. If we didn't have plants, we would just simply would not be alive. So what are some other ways, though, that you can think of that plants are important? Another one is medicine. Many of the medications that you take come from some sort of a plant. There's a statistic that says that in rainforests and places where we haven't maybe gone into and discovered and tallied and recorded all of the plants that are there, that by the day, many of these plants that can be utilized as medicine are going extinct because of deforestation in the rainforests and things like that. But there are still existing plants that provide us with medicine. Probably one of the ones that you are most familiar with is this aloe vera plant. Aloe is used for burns, especially like sunburns, or if you burn yourself on something really hot. It soothes the skin. Aloe vera is also added to lotions and things, maybe even soaps, because it's very soothing on the skin. So if you've ever cut yourself or you've burned yourself, or you had a really bad sunburn one summer, if your parents are growing aloe vera outside, I bet you they went outside and they popped off a piece of one of these leaves, and inside of that is like a really slimy pulp that feels really good on burns and cuts and things like that. So that's a really popular plant that we use for medicine. People use it all the time, all day long. We plant them very easily in our gardens and outside. But there are other plants that provide us with medications too. So for all these reasons, plants are incredibly important things. Plants may be more important than anything else in your life if you really think about it. And finally, did you realize that plants are also fuel? We can utilize plants and we call it biofuel. There are certain crops that we can take the oil from. We can extract, squish down, mash up, and get the oil out of certain types of crops or plants. Some of those might be things like even sugar cane and sugar beet, so sweet crops, but also starchy crops like corn and sorghum, and then a lot of the oil seed crops, so soybean and canola. Those are all used as biofuels. And basically what they do is they do a process called fermentation, and it forms different types of alcohols. And these alcohols can help run machinery, run cars, and things like that. So you may not realize it, but every time you or your grown-ups stop for gas and to fill up your vehicles, you're probably adding biofuels. You can thank a plant for helping your car get to the grocery store to buy more plants, to go to the mall to buy more plants in the form of fiber, to get to the doctor or the pharmacy to get medication in the form of plants. So we use plants for basically everything that we do every single day. You should say thank you to plants because you utilize something that plants provide us probably every second out of the day. So now that we understand that plants are really important, let's talk about a plant's life cycle. You may be familiar with, and we'll talk about this in future lessons, an insect's life cycle, or maybe an animal's life cycle, or maybe even the life cycle of a human. But anything that lives goes through some sort of life cycle where it grows from what is considered their immature or juvenile, the start stage, to becoming an adult where they can contribute in some way. So a plant goes through this also. The first, and what they do, and of course, plants start out as a seed. That seed will grow into a little seedling. It will eventually become an adult plant. If it is something that produces fruit, then pollination must happen. When pollination happens, a fruit is formed, and then the seeds from the fruit get dropped again, and the whole life cycle starts all over again. So we call it a cycle because it's continuous. It happens over and over and over again. Yes, there are humans that will plant things and replant, but if you allow certain plants just to exist, they will continue their own life cycle on their own without any human help. The very, very first stage of the plant life cycle is the seed. The seed is the baby. It's before it's become a toddler or become a little kid or become an adult for sure. And there are all different types of seeds, and I bet some of these seeds you're probably pretty familiar with. Some seeds we consume in the form of peas and beans and corn, peanuts, sunflowers. But then there are other seeds that maybe you're not so familiar with. In these pictures, there are some seeds on the left-hand side that we will use for either spices. We might mash things up like cumin. You're probably very familiar with cumin or cumino, even if you don't even realize it, because you eat that in a lot of the foods that we consume here in Texas. It's a spice that's used for a lot of Mexican foods, even a lot of Native American foods, but it's a spice that gets mashed up into a little powder, and we utilize that to make things taste a little bit better. So many of these seeds can be used as either a spice or it can be used as some sort of a food source for us. So if the seed is the very, very first stage, it needs certain things in order to allow the other stages to happen. So what are those things that seeds need to start their plant life cycle? I gave you a clue by that picture that's right there. Obviously, I think every one of us know that seeds need soil. They need soil, but what are some other things that you need in order to get your seeds to turn into plants? We definitely need water, right? Water in the form of rain out in nature or in your garden. You can pretend to you can pretend to be rain by watering your plants, by putting water on the soil so the seeds want to go through the next stage. And what else do our seeds need? We plant them in soil, we water them so they get a drink of water. But what are the things that you need in order to grow? Do you think they're the same things that seeds might need? It is. Seeds need nutrition, and so we might provide our seeds and our plants with fertilizers, which is like food for our plants. Sometimes the ground is very, very fertile and it has lots of nutrition in it, but sometimes it doesn't, and we have to supplement that and give them other food. And finally, those seeds need sun to grow, right? Once the seeds pop out with the little leaves, your plants need sun. The sun provides all the energy to allow the plant to grow. Photosynthesis happens, and photosynthesis is the way that plants make sugars and make food. And we utilize that because we pull those plants up and we eat them and we consume those sugars. But the four main things that plants need in order to survive is soil, which is the shelter that they have, water, just like we do, food, just like we do, and they also need sunlight. So after that seed is placed in the ground, the first stage of the life cycle is the seed germinating. Germination means for that seed to start to open up, produce roots, and produce a stem. And that stem will push through the soil so it can get that sunlight so it can continue to grow. And this is a really, really cool picture of the germination or growing phase of a plant. And you can see those little roots start to grow and grow and grow. Whatever this plant was, it took about 6 days for it to get to this point, and now it grows very rapidly. So the first stage of your plant life cycle is germination or germinating. The second stage is sprouting. Sprouting is when this little seed pushing out that stem is finally able to get out of the soil and be able to take up that sunlight in order to grow. So this is a picture of sprouting. Some people will consider germination and sprouting the same thing in different books, but we're going to call them two separate stages. So germination is the seed opening up and starting to make things that we recognize. Sprouting is where we see what's happening above the soil. There's a lot happening down below, but we don't really get to see that, unfortunately. So sprouting is when it pushes through the soil and we can start to see it. So with seed germination and sprouting, here's a little bit of a breakdown of it. So that seed is going to open up and then the roots will start to form. And out of the seed opens up, it comes out the little seed leaves or the plant. So now we've left the seed shell behind in the soil and it comes out kind of curved up. So we've got roots that touch the ground and what's going to turn into the seed still curled out. It comes out of the seed and it opens up. The roots stay in the soil and the leaves start to reach towards the sun. There's a term that we call those brand new leaves, and some people call them seed leaves. They're called cotyledons. A cotyledon is the first leaf. It's kind of protecting what's inside of, it's just inside of that seed shell, kind of protecting what's yet to come. So one of the activities that we're going to do, you guys are going to be able to watch. See if you can spot the cotyledons as your seed starts to finally sprout. Our third stage is growth. This is where the stems grow higher towards the sun, where the leaves get fuller, where the plant grows more leaves. The more leaves the plant has, the more photosynthesis can take place. And the more photosynthesis happens, the healthier the plant is and the more likely it is to flower and produce fruit for us. So we've got stage 1 is germination of the seed. Stage 2 is sprouting. And stage 3 is growing. Well, when those plants are growing, and some of these plants get so tall, like a big giant tree, how on earth do the nutrients move from the soil to the tippity top of the plant as it's growing? When it's a very, very small plant, it makes sense. The nutrition is right next to each other. But when that plant gets gigantic, how on earth does the nutrition move from the soil all the way up into the plant? Well, the plant has a vascular system just like we do. We have blood vessels that bring nutrition to our muscles and oxygen to our muscles and other parts of our body, our organs and things like that. Well, a plant is very, very similar. It has a vascular system. The roots take up the nutrients, the vitamins and the minerals and the water out of the soil. This is why we water the soil and not the leaves. They pull it up through the roots into the stem and then to all of the leaves. And if you look really closely at a leaf, all those little lines in the leaves are veins, and those veins are carrying nutrition. So it gets sucked up through the stems through the main stem, off to the branches, and then spread out into those leaves. So we plant our plants in soil, we water that soil, and we provide fertilizer to the soil because the roots of the plant will take it up. A little teeny tiny bit of rain is not going to be very good, but good rain that makes that soil nice and wet is going to allow those roots to suck up all that moisture and give it to the plants. The final stage of the plant life cycle is flowering. And flowering is a very, very important stage because flowering is what makes new seeds happen that get dropped down and then get to start that whole life cycle all over again. So usually for some plants, flowering is close to the end of the life of that plant if it doesn't live year after year, if it only lives a season or two. What's really, really interesting about flowering is I bet you didn't realize that flowering is responsible for making a fruit. So that plant is going to open up. Those little things that are crawling out, those have the pollen on them. You can see all that pollen. That's actually the male part of the plant. Plants have male and female parts to them. The little tiny green center was the female part. And so a job of a pollinator is to get that pollen from the male part to the female part. And it may not be on the exact same flower, but maybe another flower or another plant. When that pollination happens, the flowers drop off and this plant's been pollinated, and look at that growth. The ovary of the plant has been pollinated with pollen, and that ovary will now turn into a fruit. And in this case, that fruit is a pear. You can't really tell that that's going to turn into a pear, but that's the start of a pear. If you close your eyes and you imagine an upside down pear, that's what that is. So what we eat, the fruit and the vegetables that we eat are because a plant was pollinated. The male part of the plant, the pollen went to the female part, it got pollinated, and the female part turned into a fruit, and that's what we consume. And inside of there are the seeds, and those seeds will spit out, or a bird will eat and poop out later on, and that's how those seeds get dispersed everywhere. So here's that plant life cycle one more time. Our seeds will germinate. You see them germinating right there. Then they will start to sprout. Now they're above the soil. Now we have growth. Then we have a mature plant that's flowering, produces a vegetable, in this case it's a pea. Those peas are the seeds that get put back into the soil, dropped back into the soil to start the life cycle all over again. And it is called a life cycle because it continues over and over and over again. So for this week's activities, we have two different things. One is a worksheet to remind you to remember all the life cycle of the plant, and you can put your stickers on the proper parts or what you think are the proper parts. And the second is to watch the life cycle unfold. So let's work on our worksheet first, and then we're going to actually plant a really, really pretty flower that we can watch it sprouting, we can watch the cotyledons open up, and then we can see it grow, and hopefully by the end of Nature Club, you'll be able to see flowers forming on these plants. This is a fall flower that we're gonna grow, and so this is the perfect time of year to see them do their thing. So go into your Nature Club boxes, and in the baggie that says Lesson 1, Plant Life Cycle, look inside and you should have some stickers that have a handful of letters or words on them. And you should also have a worksheet that looks just like this. And so what we want to do is we want to label everything. So this is a plant, obviously. Let's start out by talking about what are those 4 things that plants need in order to grow. Well, we know that our plant needs soil, so I'm going to put my soil sticker right there. We didn't really talk about how the plant needs air, but it does need air. It needs the CO2 that we breathe out, the plants take in, and then they give out oxygen and we breathe that in. So air just goes wherever you want it to. Air goes anywhere. Plants also have to have sunlight, right? So let's take our sunlight sticker, and we'll put it on our sun. And our plants also need water. And the best kind of water for a plant, of course, is rain. So we can put our sticker on our little rain cloud right there. So those are the requirements of the plant. The one thing that we didn't mention was nutrition, but the nutrition is in that soil. Let's go ahead and label the parts of our plant next. Let's start with our veins. Where do you remember that we talked about where the veins are found on the plant? Veins are found all on the leaves. So somewhere here are going to be veins. And you can kind of see the lines of the veins there. And what do you remember the veins were responsible for? Why are they important for the plant? Remember, they take the nutrition from the soil all the way through the plant. We have roots of our plants. The roots are always found in the soil. So we stick our sticker there. We have stems. I'm going to put my stem sticker kind of close to the bottom of the plant. We have leaves, and of course the leaves have the veins. There are petals, which we don't actually have any pictures of quite yet, but I'll just kind of stick it over here, and maybe y'all can draw yourself a little flower or a little petal, right? So flowers are going to be wherever you see the fruit, a flower was there. So I'm going to put my stickers for petals and flowers close to my fruit, which happen to in this case, be tomatoes. Now, let's go through the life cycle of the plant. So germination happens where? It happens in the soil. So I'm going to put that close to where the roots are, because germination has already happened in this picture, but that's where it does happen. Sprouting happens where? Just above the soil surface, right? So I'm going to put it kind of right there. That's when it pushes through the soil. We don't have a whole lot of leaves yet. You only have those two little seed leaves called cotyledons. Then it grows, which is happening as the plant gets bigger. And the final stage is flowering. And I'm going to make that be very, very, very top, because that's the last thing that happens. Flowering happens, the fruit forms. If we didn't pick these tomatoes and eat them, then they would shrivel up and dry up, and the seeds inside would drop back down to the soil, and it would start the life cycle again. Okay, so that's your little worksheet on what the plant life cycle is. Also inside of your baggie, you should see some lessons and some explanations of the life cycle if you want to read about that a little bit more. But probably what you are most interested in is watching that plant grow. So plants take a while to grow. Unfortunately, there is not a really quick growing plant, but we picked one that will grow within the time that we're doing our nature club. And hopefully everybody gets some plants that transpire from it. So inside of your baggie, you should have a bag of soil. This is going to be a little bit messy, so if you need to hit pause and go get maybe a trash bag to put things on, a trash can close by, that's probably a good idea. It's a good idea maybe to get your grown-up to help you out a little bit with this so that you don't make a mess inside the living room or the kitchen. So you have a bag of soil. You also have a plastic, really flexible pot. And this pot has a hole in it, and that's to allow the water to drain out. But I have put a coffee filter inside of this pot to keep that water from spilling wherever you are. So it should kind of absorb it a little bit. Because the soil, by the time it's made it to you, is pretty dry. And so the water is just going to kind of flow through it until the soil can kind of soak it up. So what I want you guys to do is take your soil and fill up your plastic potting pot. Make sure that the coffee filter is covering that hole on the inside, and it's going to be messy, so make sure that you clean up your mess also. You might want to hit pause and let yourself have some time to do this. Now that you have filled up your potting soil or if you filled up your pot with soil, it may not go all the way to the top, and that's totally fine, because you might want a little bit of space so that the water that you put in it doesn't immediately spill out. What you have is a little tiny manila envelope, little tiny kind of yellow envelope that has zinnia seeds inside of it. You should have 3 to 5 zinnia seeds inside of your little packet. Be really careful opening this. We have it kind of taped shut because these seeds are so tiny. You want to be real gentle with them. Zinnias are a really, really pretty flower, very, very, very colorful. Your zinnia seeds will turn into a beautiful plant that you can cut and you can put on your kitchen table. They're very colorful in the fall. They do really well in the fall because it's a little bit cooler. You're going to be really, really happy. Your parents are going to be really happy with these flowers too. So these flowers can either be moved to a bigger pot once they start to grow, or you can keep them in that small pot and see what happens, or you can plant them in the ground. So what I want you guys to do is open your little envelope and take out your zinnia seeds. Before you plant your seeds in there, make sure that you give your soil a really, really, really good drink of water. We're going to watch a video from Carrie's gardening channel on YouTube on how she plants the zinnia seeds because she does a really good job. So we want to start out and make sure that our soil is very, very wet and moist. That way our seeds they absorb the moisture and they want to germinate. If you put them in very dry soil, they're not going to like that. The other reason why we want to water the soil first is because if you plant the seeds, then water it, they can either go too far into the soil or come too close to the top. So once our soil is nice and moist, we're going to open up our zinnia packets and look at our little seeds. These are what her variety of zinnia seeds look like. Yours might be a little bit smaller. And I want you to place them evened out, because you have several in your little pots, and just barely cover them with soil. We don't want them to be real deep. I don't even want you to push them down. All you need to do is move that wet soil on top. So we're just barely covering them with soil. They say 1/4 of an inch, which is very, very tiny. It is not even half the size of your pinky nail, the length of your pinky nail. Very, very, very shallow. So we're just barely covering our seeds so we can't see them with a little bit of soil. And now we want to set them in the window or somewhere else with a little bit of sunlight. And after a week, we should see the seeds popping through the soil. So next week when we meet for Nature Club, make sure you have it handy and ready because I want to see how everyone's is doing. It might take up to 2 weeks. Don't get discouraged if it takes 2 weeks. But we should, in a week or two, start to see the sprouting and germination phase happening. Germination has already happened and now they start to sprout. And these are the little seed leaves. 2 little leaves that have opened up from the seeds called the cotyledons. Well, thanks for joining us this week for Nature Club. Next week, we're going to continue talking about life cycles, and we're going to talk about insect life cycles and some of the cool ways that insects develop, where they develop, and what it looks like when they're babies. Some of them look like little aliens when they're in the immature form. My name's Miss Molly, and I'll see you next week with Nature Club.